But as long as you're experiencing that 9-bit slot between your ears, then you'll tend to get stuck in evidence. And whatever evidence you need, it's make-believe, you make it up, and then you go out and you pick evidence to prove that it's true. There's a really powerful session in the course, on the textbook on page 410, and it's called The Attraction of Guilt. And I particularly like this passage because to me it's very humorously written, yet it's so filled with deep meaning when you recognize that it's talking about correcting this game between your ears that is only your game. You know, we've got 7.5 billion people on the planet. There's 7.5 billion perceptual worlds, and everybody's trying to prove to everybody else that they're responsible for the world they live in. Everybody's talking about, you made me mad. You ever say that to somebody? You made me mad. You made me sad. You made me afraid. You hurt me. You really have a problem. You ever say that to somebody? I have a question for you. If they're the one with the problem, why are you the one with the pain? Something about that doesn't make sense. Obviously, if they're the one with the problem, they'd be the one with the pain. If you're the one with pain, maybe you have a problem and you don't know it. Why don't you know it? Because you live in denial. Every time it starts to come up in you, you talk about your children, your spouse, your parents, your neighbor, the guy across town, the guy across the block, with no recognition that it's all an inside job. 7.5 billion people right now, pretty much all of them are trying to prove to everybody else that they're the problem in their lives. And we even get people to get together and have gossip sessions to try to hypnotize each other into believing the same thing. You know, you ever go to the beach and you lay on the beach and you look up into the sky and you see this clown's face in the clouds? You ever do that? So here I am looking. Is there a clown's face in the clouds? I mean, in any way, shape, or form, is there a face up there? No, that's ridiculous. Water droplets. Now, water droplets happen to come into the right relationship and shape to resonate brain cells I have for face. And in my brain, I see a face. You remember there was somebody laying beside you on the blanket and you said, oh, look at that clown's face up there in the clouds. And they looked and they went, huh? Huh? What clown? Do you remember what you did? You hypnotized them. You got brain cells firing in them to get their brain to produce the same hallucination you were producing. Remember you said, well, see, there are 3 clouds. You see that big one in the middle? You see how it kind of looks like fuzzy hair in the top like a clown's hair? Oh, yeah. And you see that those 3 circles are 2 up a little higher, that's the eyes, and then that big round one is the nose, and you can see how the lips, and all of a sudden they go, oh yeah, I see the clown's face. They've been hypnotized. You got those brain cells firing in them, and their mind created the same hallucination as you. That's what gossip is about. That's why people get together in the coffee couch and talk about whoever isn't there, so they can blame somebody else for what's going on inside of them and pretend that they're not responsible for their own diseases. We need to put the end to sending out seekers for evidence for our hostility and fear-based content. Learn to be responsible for that and learn to remove that hostility and fear-based content. So here's how that passage goes, and rather than make any comment on it, I'm just going to read through it because it's a fairly long passage, but it just, I think it's so cute and yet so succinct on the problem. The lesson is from the textbook on page 410, and it's called The Attraction of Guilt. As love must look past fear, so must fear see love not. For love contains the end of guilt as surely as fear depends on it. Love is attracted only to love. Overlooking guilt completely, it sees no fear. Being wholly without attack, it could not be afraid. Fear is attracted to what love sees not, and each believes that what the other looks upon does not exist. Fear looks on guilt with just the same devotion that love looks on itself, and each has messengers which it sends forth and which return with messages written in the language in which their going forth was asked. In other words, when you use words based in hostility or fear about somebody, or you think it's about somebody, you don't realize it's about yourself, then your mind will build a world based in those words, but it'll show you a picture of somebody else as though it was them. Always ask yourself, who's feeling this? And if I'm feeling it, it's probably a generational pattern that may take much forgiveness work to get rid of. So this lesson goes on to say, love's messengers are gently sent and return with messages of love and gentleness. The messengers of fear are harshly ordered to seek out guilt and cherish every scrap of evil and sin they can find, losing none of them on pain of death and laying them respectfully before their Lord and Master. I think that's just so poetically written. And that's exactly what the non-being mind does. And then it goes on to say, perception cannot obey two masters, each asking for messages of different things in different languages. So when you use words of hostility or fear about someone, you're sending messengers. And those messengers can only return with things that verify what the messengers were sent to see. What fear would feed upon, love overlooks. What fear demands, love cannot even see. The fierce attraction that guilt holds for fear is wholly absent from love's gentle perception. Is your perception gentle when you're using words based in hostility or fear that seem to be about someone that you say you love? Think again, and notice it's all an inside job. What love would look upon is meaningless to fear and quite invisible. Relationships in this world are a result of how the world is seen. Which world is this now? Capital W world. What's the lowercase world show me and cloud the true world with? What is seen depends on which emotion was called on to send its messengers to look upon it and return with word of what they saw. Fear's messengers are trained through terror, and they tremble when their master calls on them to serve him. For fear is merciless even to its friends. You ever watch what a parent says to a child when they're in their hostility? You ever been on the receiving end of that? You ever watch what a child who's had that fed to them says to their parent? You ever watch what a wife says to her husband or a husband says to their wives when they're in hostility? And their minds want desperately to believe that it's somebody else's fault for what's going on inside of them? And the denial is so deep, they can't fathom that it's about themselves? You need to start to question these messengers. So fear is merciless even to its friends. Its messengers steal guiltily away in hungry search for guilt, for they are kept cold and starving, I love the way this is written, and kept very vicious by their master, who allows them to feast upon only what they return to him. No little shred of guilt escapes their hungry eyes, and in their savage search for sin, they pounce on any living thing they see and carry it screaming to their master to be devoured. And that's just a description of the non-being mind and the world that it creates. That's exactly what it does. The Course here says, send not these savage messengers into the world, especially to the people that you say are dear to you and you cherish. Send not these savage messengers into the world to feed upon it and prey upon reality, for they will bring you word of bones and skin and flesh. They have been taught to seek for the corruptible, and they return with gorges filled with things decayed and rotted. To them such things are beautiful, because they seem to allay their savage pangs of hunger. For they are frantic with pain of fear, and would avert the punishment of him who sends them forth by offering him what they hold dear. The Holy Spirit. Now, if you go with the Greek concept of the Holy Spirit, it's something about some kind of disembodied spirit being. In the Aramaic, what it speaks of is a literal feminine elemental force in you. In Aramaic, it's ruka de kudsha. So what it's speaking of here is not some kind of mystical religious idea. It's saying that there's an actual elemental force in you that when you invite it into activity will change things for you. So the Holy Spirit has given you love's messengers to send instead of those you train through fear. They are as eager to return to you with what they hold dear as are the others. If you send them forth, they will see only the blameless and the beautiful, the gentle and the kind. Now, notice the mind, the non-being mind can come in and say, yeah, well, but what about him? Yeah, him too. Him that you see is a body. Every body that you see is a projection of the content of your own brain cell structure. It's the world you see. It happens and exists only between your ears. It has never left its source. And the painful energy that you deny and dissociate from and put into your brain's image of him or her is inside of you. So this power will see only the gentle and the kind. They will be as careful to let no little act of charity, no tiny expression of forgiveness, no little breath of love escape their notice. And they will return with all the happy things they found, to share with them lovingly with you. Be not afraid of them. A couple of years ago, we were in South Florida, and we did a Healing Through Relationships workshop, the one we're going to actually do tomorrow night. And we presented a thing called My Commitment in that workshop. And after the workshop, a gentleman came up to Jeannie and said, well, you know, this is all nice, but my wife and I are already in the throes of divorce. You know, we've got so much rage. There's just too much water under the bridge to do anything about it. And so Jeannie handed him the copy of the commitment. He said, well, or she says to him, why don't you take this and just read it to her and see what happens? And he's like, you know, it's too late. It's already over. And Jeannie said, look, it's not going to cost you anything. Try it. About 3 weeks later, this guy called Jeannie and said, you're not going to believe this, but we're not talking divorce anymore. We're on our second honeymoon. And Jeannie's like, well, that's really cool. When you read it to her, does she read it back to you? And the guy kind of stammered a little bit. What do you mean? Well, when you read it to her, does she read it back to you? He says, she doesn't know I'm reading this. He's going to the back room and reading the commitment to her. The commitment starts out with, I promise to trust you enough to tell you the truth and be true to you, to have integrity in my spiritual beingness, and treat you lovingly, gently, and with respect in my thoughts, my words, and my actions, whether I'm in your presence or not. He's reading this out of her presence, and their whole relationship shifts. If you've got somebody you're currently blaming for what's going on inside of you, it's time to change the game. When you stop spraying the acid of your hostility or fear on that person, I promise you, you will get a different response. So these messengers will be careful to let no little act of charity, no tiny expression of forgiveness, no little breath of love escape their notice. And they will return with all the happy things they found to share them lovingly with you. Be not afraid of them. They offer you salvation. Theirs are the messengers of safety, for they see the world as kind. If you send forth only the messengers that Ruka Dakudsha gives you, wanting no messages but theirs, you will see fear no more. There's another line in the Course that says, there is no fear in the world that you laid not upon it.